Let's think about walking into a beautifully constructed building. You're probably going to admire the plush furniture, the modern art on the walls, maybe the vibrant paint colors, right? Well, in the world of writing, that beautiful decor, that's your vocabulary. It's just the surface paint. But delving into the source material for this explainer revealed a pretty harsh truth for any professional communicator. All that surface paint is completely irrelevant if the underlying structure, that invisible steel frame, is fundamentally flawed. So today, we are focusing squarely on that invisible framework. We're going to tear down the walls and look at the actual architectural blueprint of writing. We're going to master how to engineer flawless sentences that absolutely won't collapse under the weight of readers' scrutiny.
Here's our site plan for today's explainer. First, the invisible structural framework. Second, clauses versus detailing phrases. Third, fixing sentence fragments. Fourth, the misplaced modifier trap. And finally, building intentional clarity. Let's dive right in.
Section 1. The Invisible Structural Framework. Look, if you take nothing else away from this, please remember that a sentence is never just a random string of words. It's an invisible framework designed with one primary purpose, and that is to ensure the load-bearing capacity of your idea. Think about it. When you're writing a technical report, an executive summary, or even just a high-stakes email, you're transmitting heavy, complex data, and the human brain naturally processes language sequentially. When a sentence is built properly, the brain just effortlessly absorbs that heavy information. But if your sentence structure is weak, that meaning will quite literally collapse. Seriously, missing structural elements in technical writing frequently leads to massive project delays, simply because the reader's brain cannot process the collapsed data. It leaves them confused, and honestly, it damages your credibility.
What we found really fascinating in these sources is this concept of a structural contract. Basically, every single sentence you put down constitutes a binding agreement between you and the reader. This contract mandates that you, as the writer, promise to provide a complete, clear, and logically sound unit of information. So when you make grammatical mistakes or build sloppy, rushed sentences, you aren't just making a minor stylistic error. You are actually breaching a professional contract. You're failing to deliver the goods you promised to your reader.
Moving on to Section 2, Clauses versus Detailing Phrases.
So how exactly do we honor this contract? Well, we have to fully understand our raw materials, and the absolute most important element in our toolkit is the clause. You can think of the clause as the vital spark of your sentence. It acts as the main engine, or if we stick to the building metaphor, the primary load-bearing room of your structure. And to actually be a clause, it absolutely must contain two specific things: a subject, which is the entity performing an action, and a verb, which is the action itself. Without this vital spark, your sentence simply has no forward momentum. It has zero power.
What's really cool is how we can customize these structural anchors to fit our exact needs. Obviously, a sentence requires a subject and a predicate, but as the architect, you get to choose their utility based on the exact message you want to deliver. You can use a simple subject, like the boy, for a fast, singular focus. Or you can build a complete subject, like the young boy from Lagos, which provides necessary context and architectural detailing before the action even begins. And the exact same thing goes for predicates. A simple predicate gives you a fast primary action, while a compound predicate, like entered the class and greeted the students, allows you to seamlessly sequence multiple operations within a single, highly efficient process cycle.
But an engine all by itself is pretty bare, right? Notice the contrast here between a naked sentence and a textured one. Take the naked sentence, the boy won. It has that vital spark, a subject and a verb, so it is structurally sound, but it really lacks detail. Now look at the textured sentence. The tall boy won the race. Phrases like the tall or the race add that much-needed texture. They are specialized detailing materials that give the sentence color and depth. But here is the absolutely crucial distinction. A phrase cannot stand alone. It has no engine of its own. It must be securely bolted onto a clause if it's going to survive.
All right, Section 3, Fixing Sentence Fragments. Now we move into the troubleshooting phase. A sentence fragment is basically a catastrophic system failure. By definition, it's an incomplete thought that leaves the reader eagerly awaiting data. When you write a fragment, you are essentially stranding your reader on a bridge to nowhere. You've initiated that structural contract, you grab their attention, but you didn't actually deliver the load-bearing information. And that causes a total communication collapse.
Let's look at a super clear before and after example of how to fix this. Here's a very common system failure: because he was tired.
Now, this technically has a subject and a verb, making it a dependent clause. But when you read, because he was tired, your brain inherently stalls out. It immediately asks, okay, then what? The logic loop is broken because that word because just leaves us hanging. It is an incomplete thought. To fix this, as you can see, we must anchor that dependent clause to a strong independent clause. So the fix is, because he was tired, he slept early. Boom, the logic loop is now fully restored and the cognitive dissonance is completely gone.
So the really crucial point here is this formula. Dependent clause plus independent clause equals structural integrity. The dependent clause, because he was tired, is ultimately just detailing material. Sure, it provides the why, but it absolutely requires the vital spark of the independent clause, he slept early, to actually function as a complete, stable, load-bearing thought.
Which brings us to Section 4, the misplaced modifier trap.
Let's transition to our second critical system failure. And honestly, while a fragment just leaves a thought incomplete, this next error does something much more insidious. It doesn't just break syntax, it actually distorts reality itself. We're talking about the misplaced modifier, which is often referred to in the source materials as the highly dangerous almost trap. This is exactly what happens when incorrect word placement causes a massive data distortion. Modifiers are just words that qualify or describe other words, but when they aren't placed correctly in your structural blueprint, they end up modifying the wrong thing entirely.
Notice just how dangerous the almost trap can be here? Take a look. She almost drove the children to school every day. By placing the modifier almost right next to the verb drove, the sentence technically means that she grabbed her keys, looked at the kids, thought about taking them, and then just left them stranded on the porch. The action never actually happened. Now, look at the corrected reality. She drove the children to school almost every day. By shifting almost just a few words over so it modifies every day, the reality corrects itself. Now, she definitely drove them and she did it frequently. Just one single word shifted an inch to the left or right completely rewrites the reality of your data. Crazy, right?
The technical protocol to prevent this common and honestly sometimes hilarious misinterpretation is incredibly simple. Always place your modifiers immediately adjacent to their specific targets. Words like almost, only, or nearly are highly volatile. If you want to modify the frequency, place it exactly next to the frequency. If you want to modify the subject, put it right next to the subject. Proximity is quite literally everything in structural design.
Finally, Section 5, Building Intentional Clarity. So, how do we take these individual rules and permanently transition from accidental writing to intentional design? We do it by treating our writing process like a rigorous architectural inspection. Think of this as your final checklist for professional clarity. Before you send any document, run down this list. First, verify your anchors. Ensure every sentence has a complete subject and predicate. No bridges to nowhere. Second, calibrate agreement. Make sure your singular subjects always have singular verbs. Third, check modifier proximity. Please don't leave your kids stranded on the porch in the almost trap. Fourth, optimize density. Consider using semicolons to join closely related ideas without the clutter of extra transition words. Fifth, maintain pattern integrity. Use parallel, matching structures in all your lists. And lastly, perform an auditory audit. Just read your work out loud. If your tongue trips over the sentence, the structure is flawed.
The overarching philosophy we've explored today is exactly this. Build by design, not by accident. You see, syntax and sentence structure aren't just dry, boring grammar rules forced on us in school. They are highly engineered tools. We use them to build communication with absolute authority, tensile strength, and crystal clear clarity. When you write, you are the master architect of your own message.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought to consider the very next time you sit down at your keyboard. Now that you've seen the invisible framework holding your words together, will you continue to just write by accident, crossing your fingers and hoping your meaning survives the reader's scrutiny? Or will you start building your sentences intentionally, by design? The choice and the structural integrity of your ideas is entirely up to you.